The question often comes up, coaching or therapy? What's the difference? What do I need? And what do coaches, incidentally, need to watch out for? Let's talk about it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Top You. I am here with awareness coach Anna Dannfeld from France. I am Claudia, founder of Topcoach Luxembourg from Luxembourg. Okay, today we're talking about coaching versus therapy. What are the differences and which one might be appropriate for whom? Anna, welcome. It's such a pleasure to see you again.
Hi.
You have been a therapist. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, as a therapist, when I started out, it was a lot massage combined with talking or the conversation. And then I moved away from the physical because I felt like people needed to talk more or have that exchange, and I didn't want to do massages anymore. It's very heavy to do massages, and I did for 30 years. And then I found myself, I couldn't say therapist, because if I say therapist, people would expect sort of that therapy bit, because I didn't feel like a therapist. I'm also not a true, honest to God coach, of course, because I'm not trained as a coach. I'm somewhere in between. So I use both the coaching skills I have and the therapist skills I have. So I work quite differently from you, for example, but I'm married, the two of them. So I'm a mix of the both.
Yeah. So when you say therapist, it's more a physical therapist. It's not so much the psychological therapist. You didn't come from a psychotherapy background. You came from a massage, physical therapy kind of background. Is that true?
A bit of both, to be honest, because it's also, I think the biggest difference in therapy, I'm not psychotherapy, so but my therapy, what should we say, holistic therapy, maybe is a good word. It's a lot, I don't wait for my people to figure out what they need. I don't tell them, do it like this, but I move them to that. I question a lot. And I'm quite pushy because I want to see things happen. And when they come to me, it's often very, very, very emotional, extremely emotional, and on a very deep level. So I think that's where this pushier holistic therapy, moving them through that and over to the other side, giving keys, giving tips and tricks, giving them something to do or think or whatever to move forward, instructions.
I think that will give us a very interesting perspective. For our viewers, however, I think we should also later talk about or include all along this kind of thing, what people that compare therapy to coaching often mean is this psychotherapy. Shall I go to a therapist? Like in the terms of psychotherapist, somebody who has studied psychology and then psychotherapy to get therapy versus a coaching. And now you have also moved more into the realm of coaching, of course, based with this experience that you have. So let's maybe balance those things. So if somebody were to come now to you and say, do I need a therapist or do I need a coach? What do you answer? Well, how do you differentiate the two? What's the main points of differentiation?
That's a really hard question to answer. It would depend on the person. I always have that answer. Depends.
Yeah.
I have a conversation with the person, see where it is. And very often I have people that come that have maybe one specific question. Oh, I need to work with this. And then sometimes I can think maybe you should see a coach, because this coach can help you clarify your question and in what direction to go. If it's a jumble of vague emotions which are debilitating somehow in their personal or professional life, I would advise them to see a therapist.
Okay, very interesting. So let me maybe jump in here for a moment. From a coach's perspective now, there's two things that I would kind of watch out for. The first one, I'm bound by the ethics of being a professional coach, that therapy, I cannot take a client that needs therapy because they have kind of a psychological or mental illness, right? If somebody is depressed, somebody has mental health issues, I cannot treat them. I'm not allowed to treat them. I'm a coach. I'm not a therapist. Right, so it's very important that I keep this differentiation. And if I start having an engagement with a client and I have doubts that they might be depressed, that there might be a that they might have an addiction or things like that, then I am going to tell them, I think that it would be wise to seek out a therapist. Okay, so it's very, very clear as a professional coach that is a very major distinction. I am, as a coach, not treating people who have any kind of mental issues or defects. And that does not mean that if somebody is seeing a therapist, for instance, to deal with their depression, let's say, it doesn't mean that a coaching is out of the question. But I would check with the therapist, and both things can happen in parallel, but the aim, the intent of the therapy versus the coaching is very different. Okay, so that is the kind of legal, ethical part. Now, if I step a few thousand feet up in the air and I take a little bit of a broader view, let's say that a person comes to me and they are not in need of a therapist to heal or treat their mental issues, then I would look at the following. First of all, I think that the major conceptual distinction between coaching and therapy is that coaching is from the here and now into the future. It's a very future-oriented, practical approach. Therapy, I think, is we deal with your past so that you become okay now. Okay, so I really do think that this is therapy is making sense of the past, healing potential trauma and things like that in order to be able to manage your life today. That's the major distinction in my head, in my own philosophy, let's say. When you're a coach and you deal with the here and now strongly into the future, and it's essentially, if you stand on your own timeline, it's where do you look? It's where do you look? Do you look towards the future? Then you do coaching, or do you look towards the past? Then therapy might be more of something. It's variable. You can change where you look. You can change where you look. And even as a coach, in order to make sense of the here and now, sometimes in order to be able to move forward, in certain cases, we do explore what happened in the past. We need to look back onto experiences that have shaped us, that we could use as a resource, that, certain beliefs, where did they come from? So we can change them to make them more conducive to positive future outcomes. So it's in this case, if people are not in need of a therapist because of mental disease or defect, then it's kind of a flowy kind of thing. And I think that the line gets blurred even as a coach, because the tools that we use are psychological tools. Both a therapist and a coach uses a lot of the same tools. and insights and psychological models of what we work with those people. So the line gets very blurred, right? But I think conceptually, at least, there's a difference. Conceptually, at least, right? But again, you know, if a person wants a therapist, go to a therapist. But if you want a coach, very typically the aim is future and practice, like a practical approach, planning for the future, a solution orientedness versus a problem orientedness. And you know, all the work that you do digging in your past is at the it's to be able to move towards the future. It's being able to leverage our experience to move forward. So that was a very long one, but that's like my very brief distinction in my view, at least, between coaching and therapy. What do you think?
I actually think you hit the nail on the head. You said it's so well, because yes, very often you go to therapy as a therapist. I deal with things from the past. I really like how you said that, dealing with the things from the past, and coaching is going into the future. So I'm sort of there, right? I do the two. I'm not all out coach. I have a training as a therapist, of course, years and years of training. I studied medicine and philosophy and psychology and all kinds of things to do that work. And I think where it a little bit changed for me was when I wanted to move people into the future. You see, at one point I was like, oh my God, the same story over and over again. And it felt like I needed to start moving them forward. And that made that I had to change my way of working. And it was a big change. It was not an easy movement for me to go from one to the other. I still work with what is the past, like this program I have for women who survived childhood abuse. It's about what happened, but it's about how to let it go and move forward. It's that bit. I think the transformation is the point where I'm working. And then very often, you know, I can say to my people that I think they should see really a psychotherapist or a psychologist, or they should see a coach, because I do this bit. I'm the change maker, maybe, so that they can move in a direction. But I really like the way you said it, because yes, of course, with therapy, we deal a lot with what is in the past, what is stopping the now and the future. And with coaching, it's really about helping a person, guiding them to find their way into the future in the best way possible for them. So definitely, I agree with you there. Well said.
Thank you. I think another thing is maybe the length of the engagement, right? There is actually a thing called solution-oriented brief coaching. And there's also the equivalent in, it comes actually and picks up on a lot of things on solution-oriented brief therapy. That's actually where it came from. Steve DeChaser kind of, you know, pioneered this kind of approach. But in general, coaching can be shorter. It can be just a certain amount of sessions, unless you go truly into more fundamental mindset coaching and accountability coaching and things like that. But a lot of coaching starts out with a relatively brief engagement with, let's say, less than 10 sessions. It's not my favorite way of working, by the way, because I think a true change needs a longer engagement, but it you know, it happens, and you can as a coach make a lot of difference in a few things. But I think most people, when they seek a therapist, they kind of already know that it's going to be a much longer kind of thing. And I think one of the reasons also is because when you look back and you talk about and re-experience and refocus on, let's say, a trauma of your past over and over and over, it's very tricky to move from this what in coaching lingo they call problem space into solution space, right? Because the aim is different. And you dare to talk about those things. So, but you can potentially get stuck there. You get stuck there. And that's also actually one of the reasons why I consciously decided to become a coach, because I liked that approach. And I have been in client sessions where people wanted to bring up something out of their past and talk about it, and said, we're not here for that. Does it really matter that your mom left you alone when you were 4 on a repeated occasion to go to work? Does it really matter? Does it change where you are now? What does it matter? And if they can tell me that it matters and how it matters in the here and now, then we work on that one thing. And we don't continue with blaming the mother, and we don't continue with all these kind of things. We're like, what is it that you believe now that is holding you back? And how do you want to change it to be able to move forward? So the conversations are different. The conversations are different. And sometimes the ability to say this is not therapy, we are not going to talk about this, also helps the client to structure it differently in their head and to give themselves permission to take a future looking view. And maybe it's the first time. Maybe they were stuck in their past and their own internal story that repeats over and over and over. And the fact that the coach is there is the first time that they were kind of like torn from that. It was like a pattern interrupt, and that they actually went and are now looking into the future. And so for me, it was a very conscious decision, because what excited me was the fact of what makes people tick, and how can we influence that, and how can we allow people to increase their impact and realize their potential. As trite as those things are, for me, it's actually something really real when I say those things. And so it was this kind of very conscious thing. It's just the way that I work, this solution focused, this future looking, forward looking kind of thing. Yeah.
I think while you were talking, I have this whole, which is really good for me, where the movement and the change came for me, because you're touching on that. And I think when I worked as a therapist, really, people would come and they'd go into their story, right? The story of the past. And this story would be repeated over and over and over again. And every time there was any kind of trigger that would touch the story, the whole story would be running like over again. And at one point, I think I just thought that this is not okay. It exists only because you keep repeating it. There has to be a change. And I couldn't see myself, I couldn't see the therapy I was doing in a way, changing that. So I started posing question. I look for original cause. The original cause, that point. So say they come, because it's also often physical stuff, right? So this guy who comes with migraines. And I want to know, when was the first one? And what happened? Because while they are speaking, I can read them. I read them and I see where the triggers are. And then they said, oh, you're so tough. But I had to stop, because every time you push something, there came the story, right? So I had to stop the story and say, I just want a yes or a no, or a short answer, not the whole story. And these clients did such amazing work with this new system. Okay, they found it a bit scary because they couldn't get into, I wasn't cute anymore, right? And I used to be cute. But a lot of things happen. And I think that was the breaking point between where my new work started. I'm a roach. I'm a roach. You see, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a coach. a sort of mixture of both. And I like this way of working because I can move people forward from the past much, much faster. And I can get them to the point where they actually start moving towards the future and looking towards the future and manage to drop that. It's like a guy said once, I was listening in on a thing, and he was talking to this man that forever drives his problem. And he said, your higher says, the horse is dead. Let it go. No, you're like a man walking up a mountain, dragging a dead horse. Your higher self says, the horse is dead. Let it go.
Oh.
I was laughing so hard because he was really funny. It's very dramatic, but it stayed in my head. And I thought, voila, that's exactly it. At one point, we have to let it go. Otherwise, we'll allow that story to define us for the rest of our lives. And there will be no future movement because we're constantly existing in this old story.
Right.
You know?
I don't think, though, it's not about forgetting the story. It's to getting rid of the emotional charge that is associated with it. Right? Because it is what made us now. And no matter what our story is, we are where we are because of it. And so it's just that we shouldn't always let ourselves be so triggered and so emotionally worked up and giving it so much energy. And truly, I think it's really where we look, where do we focus our gaze. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't look around and be aware of our past, our present, and our future, but it's where do you look and where do you throw your intent and your major intent and your energy. And you know, it's really tough when you see people being so trapped, really trapped in their past, that they cannot enjoy the present, and they definitely cannot plan for the future. So
I'd like to put something in here. What I also noticed that some people use their story because the story can be useful. And today, victim has such a high status in our society. I'm sorry, but it does. You know, whoever suffered most wins a little bit of that thing, or maybe it's just within the therapy scene. But I'm seeing that, right? So in a way, sometimes this sad story can be very useful. It's a power tool. It's a way to get things that you want, but it will never really move you into a valuable future. You know what I mean? And it's not about forgetting things or saying it never happened, because that's denial. What I want is to see your story, own your story. First of all, you own your story, and then you realize that I can actually write a new story. It doesn't mean that didn't happen or that was not true. You just rewrite your story. We rewrite our story so many times through life. I just rewrote my story when I changed my life and came here. I rewrote my story. I still have my old stories, but they are not the story that is, what should we say, aktuell right now.
It's not defining the you right now.
It's not defining where I am now. But and also what I can see is from our old stories, no matter how bad or good or whatever they were, there is something to be learned, something to be had from that. Take away the nuggets, the raisins in the cake. There's always something to take away. If I hadn't been so badly abused as a child, would I have become such a good therapist? I'm not sure. So there is a certain, and that might sound really unfeeling. It's not unfeeling. I feel a lot of love and respect and gratitude and forgiveness in all of this. But I can take whatever happened to me and use it again. Right. Let's call it recycling.
It's I think the once the emotional charge, which is mostly negative, gets put into its right spot, right? That it doesn't hurt so much, that it is not all consuming, that it's not always hovering over or in front of your eyes. It's always a lens through which you see everything. Once that has gotten its proper place, the story is still the story and can actually then become the resource. A resource for the here and now and moving forward. What is it you have learned? What is the resilience you have gained? What is the true learnings that you have made? How has it shaped you in the many positive ways? And then taking that to move forward. I think that is really the whole gist of what's happening. And because and I think that is one of the major tenets of therapy as well. I mean, psychotherapy and so on, is to diffuse a little bit this negative emotional charge, and so that you're more able now to focus on where you are now and then move forward. So the lines are somewhat blurred, except when it comes, of course, to people who are, mentally sick and
that's a disease.
That's a disease, right? And but there's still coaches, especially the ones that are not true professionals and are not maybe abiding by the true professional standards of ethics and so on. They would take a person who already in the first meeting says, "Oh, I'm so depressed, and I even have a diagnosis of depression," and they will take these people on without,
and
proper,
it can turn
care. Don't do it.
It can turn so bad. It's so dangerous. I had a girl I was seeing years ago, and she was psychotic. I knew she was psychotic, and she was on lithium, and it was all good. I massage her sometimes, and she's a cute girl. But then there was this other dude who came in. Oh, he was a therapist, and he's going to help everything. So he basically told her that, oh, it's just imagination. I'm going to cure you, and made her stop taking lithium. I didn't know any about this, but one day I saw her, and she was mad as a hatter with a little son, and he had lipstick all over his. I mean, it was so crazy. And I'm like, oh, it's not okay. And just an hour later, her mother stormed into my place, and she was like, oh, and you did. I said, no. I would never. But I know she's been seeing this man, and he was actually charged. And it turned out that he had a lot of history of such abusive therapeutic behavior as it was. And to me, this was in my early days as a therapist. And for me, I saw a lot of things like that happen, which was good for me to see, to really understand the difference between things. I can have a psychotic woman, I can massage her, I can sit with her, I can speak with her, but she's psychotic. It's a disease. It's nothing I can do. It's not about rewiring her brain, right? It's what it is. And the best thing I can do is to support her so that she can feel okay in being a psychotic person on lithium, that this is okay and that there's no shame in it. This I can do, I can support her. But this, not on my table.
Right, and even with this lady was proper medical care, right, through a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, with or without medication, she can still work with a coach about coping strategies, about careful and reasonable plans for the future, and so on. I mean, it's all still possible, but it has its own proper place.
Yes.
So good. So I really think that we covered on quite a good points here. What do you think that our audience, will they get a clear picture of coaching versus therapy with what we discussed here, or do we need to add something?
No, I think it's quite clear. I think, I think for me, it became really clear as well. And I'm the one having this conversation with you. So I think it's clear for most of the audience, yes.
Right. And I hope that our audience now, if they follow us, know that if they have questions or suggestions, they can go to topcoachluxembourg.lu/YouTube and drop us a line, and we will definitely get back to them. Also, if you do like this content, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do not miss any future episodes.